Don't tell me that the moon is shining. Show me the glint of light on broken glass. Hello and welcome to Shining Moon, a Speculative Fiction Podcast, episode 14. I'm your host, Deborah L. Davitt. Today we'll continue our series by asking what it takes to be a magazine editor in this day and age. We'll discover the process that takes hold of your story from the moment you click the submit button until the moment it's published, and we'll talk about the biggest challenges facing editors today. My guests this week are Eleanor R and Shingai Njeri Kagunda. Let's start with some introductions. Eleanor R. Wood's stories have appeared in Galaxy's Edge magazine, Diabolical Plots, PODCASTLE, Nature Futures, The Best of British Fantasy in 2019, and various anthologies, among other places. She writes and eats licorice from the south coast of England. She is also one half of the senior editing team at PODCASTLE. Hello, Eleanor, and thank you for being with me today.
Hi, it's good to be here. I'm glad to be invited.
All right. Shingai Njeri Kagunda is an Afro-surreal futurist storyteller from Nairobi, Kenya, with a literary arts MFA from Brown. Shingai's work has been featured in the Best American Sci-Fi and Fantasy 2020, Year's Best African Speculative Fiction 2021, and Year's Best Dark Fantasy and Horror 2020. Her debut novella, And This Is How to Stay Alive, was published by Neon Hemlock Press in October 2021. She is the co-editor of PODCASTLE magazine and the co-founder of Voodoo Knots. Shingai is a creative writing teacher, an eternal student, and a lover of all things soft and black. Shingai is having a delay, so we are not able to speak with her right now, but hopefully she will pop on later during the podcast, and then we will greet her and incorporate her, and it will be wonderful. So, Eleanor, a lot of magazines don't really detail this on their website. So what's the process look like from the moment something's received to the moment it's published?
Well, it's kind of a long, convoluted process. But for us, we basically have a team of amazing first readers. So when a story comes into us through our submissions platform, it appears in a huge queue. And our first readers just get in there, they all dive in, they pitch in, they go through the stories in order, and they read stuff. They claim stories, they read stories, they leave comments, and they decide whether to bump those stories or to reject those stories. The stories which are bumped come to us, the editors, and we then take a look at them. Basically, we read every single story that's bumped to us. We read the comments that our first readers have left, so we get an idea of their thoughts and why they have sent this up to us and what they think is the pros, the cons, whatever. We basically have a rating system too, so anything that gets rated a certain level or above gets bumped to us automatically. So we know the stories that are sent up, if the reader has thought that they are worth bumping, or if it's the other extreme where they absolutely adore this story and they couldn't bear to see it go. So we have a little bit of a spectrum in there too. But all of that is obviously very personal. It's very subjective. A story that one reader adores, we might not, or a story that one reader thinks is okay, we might find we absolutely love. So it's all subjective. So we take it all with a grain of salt, but we read everything that we get bumped. And then we go through a decision-making process. So once everything has been read, so the slush pile is empty, every story has had a response, whether it's a bump notice or a rejection, then Shingai and I will go through all of the stories that we've been sent, and we read them and we make decisions, and we have a very fancy little spreadsheet where we write down our little comments for each story, what we think of each story that we read, and then we discuss them. And we discuss the stories that we have kind of shortlisted in our own little, plans, and which ones we think are good contenders. We're very fortunate in that we almost always agree on everything that we read. Very, very rarely do
Oh, that's actually
Shingai and I have
wonderful.
disagreements on stories. Sometimes, but not often. We're very fortunate. So we have that process happens. Then we accept the stories that we decide we are going to purchase.
She's in the lobby. I've got her. And here is Shingai. And she is with us, and it's going to be an amazing interview. So the question that Eleanor was already answering, we're going to let her finish answering, which was the process and how from the moment it's received to the moment it's published. And she had just gotten to the fact that you guys have very few disagreements about stories, which is amazing and phenomenal and a very rare thing. And so what happens next once you guys come to an agreement?
So, we send out acceptances, basically, for everything that we decide we want. And we have a process from that point where we do all the copy editing and any structural editing before we send out contracts, just in case anything changes in the word counts, things like that, before the contract stage. So we do that. They all get edited and we agree the edits with the authors, and then we do the contracts, and then they go into our queue of stories that we are going to run. And from that point, because we're an audio magazine, we have to cast them. So once the stories are edited, they move into the casting phase, and that is where we find the right narrator for each story. And that can be, that's kind of like a how long is a piece of string question, because sometimes we can cast a story easily and quickly and it's fantastic. Sometimes it takes a really long time to find the right narrator, particularly if we're looking for a specific demographic or a specific combination of demographics or anything. We always try and make sure that we match the narrator's demographic with the story. That's very important to us. And so that can take time. And sometimes it means that a story has to wait a little while. We try and be as communicative as we can with the authors if it's taking longer than we would expect. But so at that point, once we've cast a story, we wait for the narration to come in, and then our amazing host, Matt Dovey, does a host spot for that episode, and our amazingly talented producers produce the episode, and then we run the episode. So that's basically a brief rundown of the process. And usually there's a few hurdles along the way. We have kind of a sort of, I wish it wasn't in joke, but it's true that we generally have a weekly panic with the masthead where we all kind of go, oh no, something's gone wrong, a narration hasn't come in, what are we supposed to do? And we have to rejiggle things, and our schedule is always fluid for that reason. We just can change it at the drop of a hat, so we do. But somehow we manage to stay afloat most of the time.
Shingai, would you like to add something to that? I saw you nodding along, so.
Mostly nodding along because Eleanor did a great job at describing the whole process. And yes to the weekly panic and managing to stay afloat most of the time. I think one of the things that makes this work is that it is a team of people. And so being able to kind of juggle the ball from person to person has been really, really helpful, especially when we're low on capacity. Yeah.
Which has been true. So.
Yeah, which has been true a lot this year.
Mm-hmm.
This has been a hell of a year for the two of you from everything that you've said. So, yeah. And
other members
I'm going to switch.
Kind of crazy.
Oh, God. I am so sorry to hear that. Oh, what happens if a story is absolutely great but doesn't fit with other stories from a coming issue? I think is a good question to move to. And I'm going to throw that at Shingai.
Oh, if a story is a great story, I feel like if it's a story that we're both deeply in love with, We try to make it work, even if it's not in the next couple of episodes. We'll like save it for future episodes. What's hard, and I feel like I tell this to people, which is like a big thing about rejections and not taking them super personally. I know this now, being on the editor side, having been someone who submits to a lot of magazines and getting rejected a bunch. That when you have a story that is similar to stories that have come out in the magazine, like it feels too similar to a story that we just accepted and just decided to publish, then it's a lot harder, even if we love the story, to accept it. Because we do want a range of voices and like a diversity in the stories that we're trying to tell and trying to share with the world. So that sometimes we have to say no to a story that would be a really great fit, but sadly came after a different story that was very similar.
Yeah, people always say read the magazine and see what we've published recently to see if you'll fit in. So that tends to suggest to people, well, I should just write something similar. And what you're really looking for is similar but different.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is a hard window to hit. It really
tricky.
is.
It is tricky.
It's tricky, and I mean, it is true. It's what they say. It's like it's not personal, and the editors may have just bought a story like yours, and it's like, yeah, you go, oh, yeah. As a writer, you go, yeah, maybe. But when you're on the other end of it, you go, actually, this is completely true. This really does happen.
Yes.
You really do find stories that are too similar thematically or whatever. I mean, I think we're fortunate in many ways because we don't have like an issue, like a quarterly issue, for example. We do an episode every week, so it does give us a bit more flexibility in that regard. We can't, like Shingai said, we can just kind of put something off for a few weeks or a couple of months down the line and fit it in, and it won't seem too close together. But
my only experience with editing so far has been working on Ida the Telescope, which is a themed magazine, and it comes out quarterly. And with that, I had a set theme. And then I was basically trying to create the best possible collage of poems that could go together. So I wanted things that would contrast with each other, things that would speak to each other, things that would have a conversation with each other. So it was a whole different process than what you guys have going, where you can put up two stories that might be in conversation with each other, that might be reflections of each other, but then you can move to the next episode the next week, and you can have completely something else. So I really think it's really great how much freedom you guys have in the podcast world.
Yeah. I think another thing to note about that is, I don't know if Eleanor has mentioned this earlier, but we do have limited funds too, which is, I think, like a big part of why we can't just take every story we absolutely adore.
Yes.
It's a huge part.
And it kind of sucks. Yeah. So sometimes
didn't you guys move to nonprofit status this year?
Yeah. EA did, but it's still, it's very new. It's all still a work in progress. It hasn't actually affected our budget yet. We're told it will in good ways at some point, but right now, it's
Does that mean that you guys get to go after grant funding and things like that? Like NEA grants and stuff like that?
It's not something that we handle because we are run by escape artists as an organization. That's kind of what the outer administrative team handles. So I do believe that is in process, and they are planning to be doing that, and that's definitely avenues that they're looking into. All of that now, which is great. It gives us plenty of potential. But it's not something that we have control of as the editors. We have control of our own little podcast, and everything else is kind of dealt with by a different department. But for sure, that is, I know, in the works.
All right. So getting back to what you do have control over, I'm going to ask Shingai, what do you personally want to see in the next upcoming window of PodCastle? What do you look for? What's going to attract your eye in the November window?
So one of the things that definitely attracts my eyes is just stories that aren't as common in the publishing scene. So we talk a lot about like having diverse stories. When we're talking about diversity, we're talking about both gender queer stories and also like ethnicity and background, and more Black and brown stories and Indigenous stories, and stories from people in the world who haven't had access to the resources that they think would make their stories super great, you know? I'm really interested in like stories of from the margins of society.
Okay.
Yeah. We also love heart stories that make me feel something, which is a very big thing. But we've had a couple of stories that have made me cry. And it's been huge because it feels like it's healing a part of me that I didn't even know needed to be healed.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And it's really cool to be able to publish those stories.
Wonderful. Any that are coming up that you'd like to shout out, or ones that were recently out that you could shout out that people could go and also be healed by?
Oh.
Or do you, or are they all, or do you have to be sort of democratic in the ones that you love?
We love all our
They're all
children
my favorite. I don't have a favorite child. I am genuinely excited about all of the stories that are coming up. I think like especially this last round, there was the ones that we chose, we both were deeply in love with to some degree. Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely
all
true.
right.
And I think
so same question to Eleanor.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to elaborate and basically say that I think it's absolutely fair to say that we don't buy any stories that we don't absolutely love. So if we buy your story, it's because we genuinely love that story. And that's why it kind of rises above, the stories that it came in with, because it did touch us on a personal level. Because like Shingai said, the stories that make you feel something are everything. If a story makes you cry or if it makes you laugh, it's really hard to turn away from that. That sticks with you. You want the stories that stay in your mind and stay in your heart and feel like they have changed something about you or your perception of the world. Or I love finding stories that show me a perspective that I've not experienced before, or a perspective that is maybe a familiar situation from a totally different angle, or from a point of view that doesn't usually get heard. Those kind of stories just really, they really speak to me as well, because it's like that's the point of fiction for me, is that ability to generate empathy, that ability to actually show people things that they wouldn't experience otherwise. So like Shingai, I'm looking for the unusual stories. I'm looking for the ones that that don't feel like we've heard them before, that don't feel like something that it doesn't feel familiar as soon as you start reading it. You want something that makes you go, wow, this is different, this is unusual, this is taking me somewhere I didn't expect it to take me. Or equally, stories that kind of play with tropes in a completely fresh and original way. I mean, I love that too, because fantasy is founded on a lot of tropes, and some of them are way overdone, and some of them are not so overdone, and some of them are just begging to be told from a different angle. So that always excites me when we find something like that. And I think we're looking for some lighthearted stories right now too, because it's been a really tough year.
We also love stories that make us laugh.
Hard to write. Right at the moment, I find that everything I'm writing is bittersweet, and it's like, well, I don't want to send that to PODCASTLE right now. There are reasons.
Yeah, there are. I mean, we love bittersweet too. We like something that's, stories that are hopeful, stories that aren't just sad, stories that have something that gives you a light at the end of the tunnel, or just a little bit of joy.
Mhm.
We've published some really fun stories this year, which I have loved. And I've loved putting them alongside some of the more intense, darker stories because they juxtapose really well together. And I love
Yeah.
the fact that we've got that freedom to just be really eclectic with the stories that we buy. As long as it's got a fantasy element, that's the only thing that we have to have as our criteria. Everything else is, yeah, as much variety as possible. We love it.
Yeah. One of the things that I just thought about was like the phrase expanding the imagination, like stories that expand our imagination. That's pretty cool because it's like speaking to what Eleanor was saying about um, turning tropes on their head. And even stories that are like completely unexpected. I feel like it's playing with the reason that fantasy and speculative fiction exist in a lot of ways is to expand our imagination and like show us that anything and everything is possible. So stories that do that, we're here for.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Love that.
I love the idea of expanding the imagination. I think that is a great phrase, and I will try to keep it in mind for my next submission to you. Let's
Yeah.
see. What other questions do I have here? Obviously, the AI situation is hitting a lot of magazines, particularly like Clark's World, very hard. Have you guys been having anything like that? Do you have to have your first readers just be aware of the possibility of the AI written stories? Is it hitting them particularly hard? Because you obviously have a filtering process, so it might not hit you guys that much, but your first readers probably are being inundated. What are you doing to try to help them not be overwhelmed by a wave of it? And I'll ask that of Shingai first.
Sure. I think that we're super lucky for one because it hasn't hit us as hard as it has hit some other magazines.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's important for us is that there's always an open line of communication between us and our first readers. So if they're struggling with anything, they will tell us. And we will be able to put systems in place to protect them and keep them safe. Eleanor, if you have any more specificities to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, all of that is 100% the case. We have had conversations absolutely with our whole team about this. I'm only aware of a handful of stories that have been brought to our attention that were clearly written by AI. At the moment, they pretty obviously stand out like sore thumbs. I don't know for how much longer that will be the case, but they are pretty obviously, computer generated stories. So, but we also do have a policy that we put in place fairly recently by which we ask all submitters, they have to tick a box in Moksha to say that they've not used any AI to generate the story. So obviously that's on a trust basis. Obviously someone can lie about that, but they have to state that up front. And it's now, I believe it's in EA's contracts as well, that if you submit a story that you didn't write, basically it's plagiarism if you didn't write it. So we're very upfront about it. It's now in our guidelines that we do not accept AI generated submissions. And yeah,
it's sad that you have to say it, but
it is.
Yeah.
It is. But unfortunately, you do have to be upfront about it and just be in solidarity with the publications who have been hit harder than we have. As Shingai said, we have been quite fortunate. It's not been terrible for us at this point. But yeah, it's out there. We have to be aware of it. And that's all we can do right now, is just be aware and keep the communication open with our whole team, which is what we try and do.
Yeah, you did mention something about keeping your first readers safe, and that is something else I wanted to touch on. Content warnings. You don't have anything on your Moksha page saying content warnings. Is this something that might be coming in the future so that you can keep your first readers comfortable and safe?
For me, I can't see it being a mandatory. We do have quite a few submissions which have content warnings either in the cover letter or at the top, and we do leave that up to the author. It is their choice. For me, as an editor reading, although there are obviously things that I'm not particularly keen on seeing, I personally don't want a content warning at the top of a story because it will affect my perception coming into that story.
Okay.
I want to go into a story with no preconceptions. I never read a cover letter before I read a story, just in case the author has summarized the story, even though we ask them not to. Sometimes they have, and I don't want to have, for me personally, I don't want the preconceptions, but we do appreciate it if authors put them in. It's their choice, and it does help our first readers at times, but we always make sure that our first readers are absolutely aware that they are never obliged to read or finish any story if they're not comfortable reading it.
Okay.
If they start reading a story
that is good
and
to
it's
hear.
like, nope, I need to stop reading this, they just do, and it goes back into the pile. Maybe they leave a note for the next person. Yeah, I mean, we make it absolutely clear that nobody is obliged to read anything. If there's a certain author that they know they don't want to read, they don't have to. If there's a certain, warnings, I mean, it's tricky. There are, especially at the slush stage, there can be some unpleasant stuff. Luckily, we don't get too much of it, but it happens.
And we also have guidelines about what we don't want to see. Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, when I was slushing for a publisher that I will not name, because while they supported me wonderfully, I don't want to encourage anybody to send anything more like this to them. They had guidelines in place, and one of the ones that I wound a full manuscript of poetry that I wound up reading, and I got about 30 pages into it, was just all sorts of violence against women, cannibalism, rape, everything like that. And I'm just like, it's a woman-owned publisher outfit. How would you even think to send this here? And it was done just straight-faced. I read the cover letter. There was no sense of the propriety of sending that there. It was just, here's my stuff, enjoy it. And
it really does.
Yeah, so I was in the position of telling the publisher, I don't want to continue with this. There's not enough brain bleach in the world for this, and warn anybody else who has to read it. And they said, that's fine, thank you for letting us know. And there we went from there. So
yeah, I mean, we also
it isn't.
Sorry, our readers never have to finish a story either. If they get to a point where they know that it is absolutely not suitable for podcasts, I mean, like you said, if we get stories with that kind of graphic content that they know we don't want, this is never going to be published by us. They are under absolutely zero obligation to carry on. So the first hint of that, they don't need to see where it's going next. They don't need to see if it's got.
There's an escape hatch available. Pull.
You can just nope out, because it's not going to make it. We're not going to buy that story. We've specified in our guidelines we don't want that content. So yeah, they don't have to finish a story if it is totally unsuitable in that way.
And this is the reason we have tiers too, for like rejection and exception. So like they can also, when they send a rejection, just be like, this is why.
Awesome. Also, the tiered rejections forms are very useful.
They are. We actually have a tier 0 rejection, which gets sent out very, very infrequently, I am happy to say, but it is the one we send out if we get problematic content. Basically, it says this isn't stuff we want to see. Please read our guidelines for a better idea of what we do want. And that's something that, again, we allow our readers to do, and it indicates to us that they've received a story, which is just like, no. And we can keep an eye on that. We can see if there's, say, an author who keeps submitting the same kind of stuff that it's never going to make it because it's just unpleasant and violent or whatever. We can keep an eye on that, and we can make decisions from there if we want to intervene if necessary.
It is awesome that you guys have these things set up so that everybody is protected and comfortable and can work as a team. Yeah. So my next question is, what's the single biggest issue facing you as an editor that makes it hard to operate a magazine in today's age? And I'll leave that open to either of you who wants to answer it first.
Okay, I think I would say the single biggest issue for me personally is I honestly struggle with the hierarchy of publication. And sometimes I struggle with rejecting people. I struggle I struggle with being the gatekeeper. That's something that I really struggle with. And I just want more stories out in the world. And like, I want, like, even if we don't publish it, like, I think that's one of the things that's really big for me. Like, I want people to continue sharing their stuff, sharing their work, and like, and it shouldn't just be stories that are published by, the pro-paying magazines that are the stories that are considered by the whole world as valid stories, you know? So that's one of the things that I think about a lot. And just how we can continue to make the publishing industry more accessible.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think we're trying slowly, but it's a lot.
Yeah, unfortunate for better or worse, when it comes around to award season and the recognition of it all, there's only a few publications that people really read seriously for that, and that's unfortunate and discomforting, and on many levels. Eleanor, same question to you. What's the single biggest editor that faces you as an editor that makes it hard to operate the magazine?
Yeah, in terms of being hard to operate the magazine, I don't know that that's necessarily the way I would phrase it, because it's we can do this. we do it. You know,
you can do this all day. Okay.
Yeah, it's this part. You know, the editing part, the actual reading stories, buying stories, helping people's work get out there. That's amazing, and I love it, and I could do that all day. But yeah, I think going back to what Shingai was saying about the gatekeeping side of it, I do feel like there's still very much a sense of power imbalance between editors and authors. And as someone who's a writer and an editor, I am acutely aware of that. And I think there's no question, if you are in a position where you're able to make someone's publication dreams happen or not, you are in a position of power, unfortunately. But trying to just to come at it with as much humility as possible is really important for me, and to come at it from the perspective of that writer who I am communicating with, or whose story I'm editing, or whatever. I want to come at it the way I would want to be approached as a writer as well. And I want to it's hard to try and keep that like an even playing field, because we're all in this industry together. We don't have a magazine if we don't have writers. I mean, they are the only reason we're here. So without them, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing either. And I think trying to just kind of shift the balance a little bit so that it's more of an equal partnership, or viewed as more of an equal partnership than a hierarchical situation, because it should be seen as teamwork. Somebody writes something, somebody helps improve it and get it out into the world. It's teamwork. It's not one is above the other or whatever. That's all nonsensical perception, but it is a perception that's there. And unfortunately, I think there are still editors out there who contribute to that perception, and I really personally want to try to make an effort not to contribute to that, and in fact to try and turn it around a bit if I can. I mean, for me, that's important.
Speaking as somebody who has profound social anxiety, I will have to share kind of a funny story with you about editors editing and that social hierarchy. I was at a convention in Dallas a couple of years ago, and the whole reason I wanted to go there was because Trevor Corici of Analog was going to be the guest of honor. And I was so excited. I was so excited. I was going to be on a panel with him, and I did not have the guts to address him personally. And so as I'm sitting there with my little tent of my name in front of me, he comes over to me and says to me, just very quietly, "I know your name. You are getting close. Keep submitting." And the next thing I sent to him, he accepted.
Wow.
So that is how editors can change that hierarchy, can reach out and change somebody's world entirely just by being approachable like that. So I wanted to say thank you to all the editors who are approachable and who do make it like that. But you're still absolutely terrifying to reach out to when I'm saying, "I have a podcast. Would you like to be on?"
We're not scary, we promise.
Yeah, the farthest thing from scary.
Seriously, we are secretly scared ourselves most of the time. That's the truth.
Literally. Yeah.
It's nerve-wracking.
Well, I don't have too many more questions that I've written down. Is there anything else that you guys would like to talk about? Anything about editing, the challenges that you've faced in any particular moments that have stood out to you in the last year or so, that of stories that have changed you as you've read them, anything like that stands out would be lovely to hear.
I think the thing that comes to mind instead of challenges, I want to celebrate the things that I've really appreciated about being an editor, because a lot of it has, there have been challenges, especially when other life stuff is happening. And most of editing is volunteer work, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so it can be really hard to navigate and to balance when you have a day job, and I was struggling with getting my immigration status sorted this year, and there was a bunch of other things happening in life that made it hard. And there was a bunch of other things that made it really hard for Eleanor too. But just us being able to be in relationship with each other in this way has been a support system for the other things too. And with the rest of our team, just having people who are rooting for you. I think that's one of the things that I'm really grateful for with PodCastle. The joy and the connections that I've made. And the sometimes humor, even when there is grief and there is crying. I think the biggest thing with the writing world is the community that you get out of it. I think for me that has stayed true over the years in every part of the writing world that I enter. The community has been the thing that has sustained me. Yeah.
100%. I can't echo that enough. I mean, honestly, PodCastle has been an incredible support system for me this year. As much as it's been challenging in good ways, it's also been exactly what I needed, quite honestly. And we do have such an amazing team. I think we are really, really fortunate to have people who we work with who are dedicated to everything that we all want to make happen, that we are genuinely a team that works well together, and we all care about each other. And I think that's really rare in any working environment, to have the connections that we all have as our masthead, which is Shingai and myself, and our assistant editor Caitlin, and our host Matt, and our audio producers Devin and Eric. We all communicate on a regular basis about what's going on, and everybody has each other's backs, and everybody supports each other. And there's genuine connection, there's genuine love there. Honestly, at risk of sounding cheesy, there genuinely is love amongst that group of people. And we're all working toward a shared goal that we're passionate about. We all care about this, and we all want to do it right and do it to the best of our ability. And it's a great thing. It's a great feeling. And I think for me, some of my favorite episodes have been the ones that we've really collaborated on as a team. Some of the like full cast narrations that we've done together. It's just been fun. And yeah, those stories are usually some of the lighter ones when we do that, but it gives us an opportunity to just really enjoy the work, all of us together, and to feel like that's something we made, all of us. We did this thing, and it's good. It's very affirming, and yeah, and we have some talented people out there. I will say, one of my favorite episodes from this year is Young Lich and the Dance of Death, and if you haven't listened to it, please.
Oh, I was just thinking about that.
It's amazing. It's such a great story. And Eric Valdez, our incredible producer, narrated it, yeah, and produced it, and my goodness, he knocked it out of the park. It's just it's a work of art. Please do yourselves a favor. It's so fun, and it is just
all right.
He's a genius.
So that is The Young Lich and the Dance of Death.
Yep.
And that's in Podcastle.
Let me see what episode number it was. In case people want to find it easily. It was episode 774, and it was Valentine's Day this year that it came out.
I will put a link to that in the YouTube notes. And I'll put a note for that on the Budsprout site as well.
Thank you. It's fun. Nobody will regret having listened to that one, I tell you.
All right. Well, again, this is going to be a shorter episode because we aren't doing readings and we're not doing dissections of other people's work and everything like that. But it's been wonderful speaking to both of you. And I really appreciated having you on the podcast. Thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
It's been an absolute pleasure. And anytime you guys want to pop back on and tell me about what's going on at PODCASTLE, please let me know. I love hearing from everybody in the industry and finding out what's going on and letting people know. Next week on Shining Moon, Editors and Editing 2 with Stephen Grenade and Cecilyn Smith of Small Wonders. So we're going to be moving from a larger, more established market to a newer, less established market. We'll be talking about the challenges that they face as they try to make people aware of their existence and try to get the best stories that they can for their audience. And we are out. Again, thank you both so